So, good morning, welcome. I'm with my good friend Steve Knightley, who is going to talk to us about Show of Hands. Now, those of you that don't know who Show of Hands are, they have probably epitomised what it is to be a cottage industry within the music business. Steve, tell us a little bit about Show of Hands and the background behind it all, and then we'll rewind right back to the beginning and talk about the journey.
Well, I grew up playing acoustic music in the days when it was cool. When as a teenager to pick up an acoustic guitar, you could be James Taylor, you could be a troubadour, you could be the freewheeling Bob Dylan, you could be Ralph McTell on the cover of his album smoking a cigarette. It was like a role model. Now, that went out of fashion a lot subsequently, but at that time when we were 14 or 15 or 16, there was a scene in East Devon, an acoustic music scene, not just in the folk clubs, but in the universities, the teacher training colleges. So when you're about 16 and you want to stay up late and get laid, if I can say that,
Absolutely.
drink and misbehave and get away from your parents, right? Because we hang around with them, don't we? The folk scene was something to aspire to.
Sure.
So we developed a whole range of skills as acoustic troubadours, and material-wise, Bob Dylan, all of that sort of generation. Then we discovered English folk music, and the folk scene was being run by people only 8 or 9 or 10 years older than us, still in their early 20s. So we developed those range of crafts. Subsequently, when I moved to Brighton, the career model was always, okay, you can play something, you've got to join a band, and you've got to be rich and famous. That's it. Forgetting that original ethic of the music, that it's community-based, that has a locale, that it's like a local cheese and an ale, you forget all that in your 20s because you want to be rich and famous. It didn't work out. I spent 8 years on the London rock scene, didn't get signed. In those days, you couldn't even make a demo without someone buying a studio. There was no technological democracy involved. You couldn't even do that. Moved back to the West Country at the age of 32. And my good friend, Mr. Phil Beer, who's a multi-instrumentalist, world class, he'd been playing on the folk rock scene, and he said, look, remember the stuff we used to play in our teens, you've got a bunch of songs from the rock band era. Why don't we go and do some folk clubs? So we did, but as well as the folk clubs, we did pubs. For every folk club, we did a pub. So we ended up playing original acoustic music in noisy environments. And once we made the transition to the festival stage, we were gig fit. We had a real sort of like attitude and drive, and all that rock band experience was then applied to that acoustic music. So we had a bit of a winning formula. We didn't dither around tuning, and we knew how to build a set. We then met a guy called Gerard O'Farrell, who was years ahead in terms of internet and MP3s. And he developed a business model where we didn't work for set fees. We worked for a percentage of the door. We empowered people to put us on by being completely self-contained. Even when we didn't get paid, we made sure a sound engineer and the PA got paid. So we developed this model, and some of the people that booked us in a local folk club, I'm thinking of Steve Nunn in Norwich, he now books us in the Theatre Royal in Norwich. Yeah. And the Albert Hall is that same template. Self-contained, sound men, lighting guys, PA, percentage of the door. All of a sudden, just in order to survive, we had developed a model which is regarded as an industry standard. Yeah. It's regarded as the cottage industry, how you send it out to the world. And about 8 years ago, there's a friend of mine, Karen Tomlinson. She was head of artist liaison at EMI. And she came to see us play at some little art centre up in the Cotswolds. And afterwards she said, my God, we've just been on an international empowerment refreshing weekend in Italy with heads of companies being told that this is how the consumer of the future will define themselves in terms of their high value, locally sourced, unique to them brand. He said, and you guys are here signing your CDs that you've made yourself, playing to people that you're on a percentage of. So people say, when did you develop this model? It was just to survive, we did it. No one was going to sign us. No one was going to chuck money at us. There was no managers or major publishers. So by accident and by opportunism and by being a bit canny with Gerard's help, we built this model, which officially ended 5 weeks ago.
Yeah.
On March the 16th at the Little Arts Centre in Colchester, that 30-year journey finished overnight.
It's been a crazy few weeks in that respect.
Yeah.
So back in those early days, what kind of inspired you to decide, rather than go down the traditional route of looking for industry support and kind of putting that infrastructure behind you of road managers, labels, publishers, blah blah. What made you decide to kind of tackle that and do it yourself? Was it simply because in this genre that support network didn't exist, or did you want to kind of control that and do that yourself?
It was a mixture of the two things. I mean, we were in our mid to late 30s. Who was going to invest a lot of money in us? You know, going to sign us and manage us, you know, at that level. Maybe if we'd have been Celtic, you know, there might have been that extra thing.
Yeah.
You know, the Irish troubadours. You can see immediately our manager would go, yeah, I can market that, commercialize that. But we're two sort of hairy West Country guys. And also the whole thing about English music, it doesn't have a brand. I mean, it doesn't mean anything, does it? If you were to say you're a couple of Irish or Scottish musicians or American musicians or whatever, you can apply a bigger genre to you in particular, and you can see how it markets. But if someone was to say to, you know, what does Show of Hands do? Well, it's hard to pigeonhole it, isn't it? So when people see us, they understand, but in advance of seeing us, it's you know, English acoustic music with rural themes. Don't know.
So moving kind of to the other end of the journey, from to the end, I guess, or the most recent kind of part of this story. The Royal Albert Hall is now kind of part of the cycle. You do that every few years.
Yeah.
Every 5 was that?
But yeah.
Glastonbury's become a regular event in the calendar. Radio 2 are regularly putting you on their A-list. It's not uncommon to hear a Show of Hands track on.
We got playlisted for one song. We got playlisted for the most frothy, light-hearted commercial piece of nonsense. Whereas we know,
I like that.
We know personally Bob Harrison, Mark Radcliffe. We know Jeremy Vine. We know Andrew Marr. I mean, they are fans. We know it's like Michael Wood, the historian. So if they get a program that deals with issues, they'll all play us. But the funny thing was, when we released Roots and Country Life, the feedback we got from Radio 2 was it contained too many issues. Wow. They were produced commercial songs but contained too many issues. So the one that they actually playlisted, in the verse it said, I don't want to sing about greedy bankers or the rural poor. So the one that they playlisted mentioned all the things that they said they couldn't playlist, and they playlisted it, you know. So, you know, they have an idea of who the daytime listener is, and the particular songs that we were producing didn't tick that box. But, you know, as I say, those days are all over anyway now.
Do you think, in terms of the kind of political angle and the real kind of rural issues that are captured in the song, do you think they've opened doors in terms of things like the Radio 2 opportunity? Would those, you know, if your songs had been the usual kind of content, talking about the love of your life, blah, 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 do you think the same doors would have opened, or do you think that's been because of...
No, I got to do a show with Michael Wood because... you know, because he's interested in the historical themes. Andrew, who was it? Andrew Marr. That's right. He heard Country Life when he had a second home in South Devon, and he said it made him twinge with guilt. You know, so people come across the songs. Same with Matthew Bannister, who controlled Radio 1. He does a lot of media. He does Folk on Foot. He interviewed us when he was working for Radio 5 late night in a Devon pub. And it was about rural issues. Tom Heap was there, the rural correspondent. And he said Country Life said more in 3 minutes than he could do in 45 minutes. So through those issues, we've opened doors to people who champion those issues generally in their career. So we've got a good presence, and we know some very sort of influential people, but it's not through being background music on a playlist.
Sure. We'll talk about the music a little bit more in a little while, but you mentioned Gerard's influence earlier on, and I got the pleasure of meeting Gerard and Mick Dolan as well as part of that journey. And and as at the time a budding sound engineer, recording engineer, it was fascinating to see that they were pushing boundaries in terms of what was kind of the norm at that level. And by that I mean very respectfully of kind of the two guys on the acoustic guitar level. You know, I remember hearing the way that delays were used live with you guys and thinking, wow, that's quite remarkable stuff. How important has that kind of technical aspect been in defining your sound and your brand as a Show of Hands?
Well, what happened during the course of our career is that the technology of amplifying acoustic music got better and better. You know, I use undersaddle pickups, and the way that I play was when I compress them as I play, or when I hit the strings, it delivers a bottom end thump. You know, now word came from the pop and rock world in Australia, and rather than trying to get rid of that, he emphasized that. He started to use the hooray, 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 those rock and roll delays, as you say. And you should hear Chris Sherburn and Denny Bartley take the piss out. Show of hands, hands, hands. How you doing? Doing it. But so we developed this sound, and the time we spent playing, I spent playing rock and roll, and then the time we spent playing in pubs, added then to concert standard PA systems. It all, and the whole thing sort of merged together. You were aware that you know that the thump is giving a rock dynamic to a festival and a theatre crowd, although it's not like a rock and roll strut, if you see what I mean. So we were managing to, again, open doors sonically to a rock audience or a theatre audience without really offending the sensibility of either, if you see what I mean.
I do, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Interestingly, do you remember your old HZ PA system?
Yeah.
I've still got that somewhere.
No, I tell you what, when we went to the Albert Hall Festival in '96, they saw all this stuff coming in from Shepton Manor. All these disco speakers. And the thing about those old plastic box speakers, you are very much in their space. Yeah. You know, all modern D&B stuff chucks sound efficiently away from you.
Line array, yeah.
So it's brilliant, but you're not getting the top end. You're getting sort of like mids coming back at you. So all these D&B speakers lashed up, and the technical people at the Albert Hall was going, well, normally we use, and I'm not, HZ. I said, yeah, mate, it stands for Highly Suspect. And then when we said we wanted to do a raffle at the Albert Hall, they just thought we were a bunch of country boys come to take the piss. I just said, we'll lash them together with baler twine, won't we? And but all these boxes piled up and strapped together. And I keep arguing with our audio guys, you know, with the people we use now who are world class. They say, no, we have to have the. And I said, Rob, can you remember when we did at Albert Hall with HZ? He said, it would have sounded terrible. I said, people said it was one of the best nights they heard. You know, it's not always about the acoustic quality. A band that isn't rehearsed and isn't getting on with each other, is their acoustic brilliance is wiped out at a stroke. You know, you're selling a different thing. You know, you're selling a different dynamic. And for what we did at the time, that worked fine. You know.
So that creative element is without doubt kind of been part of the success of Show of Hands. In terms of the business aspect, and I say we'll touch on the music shortly, but in terms of the business aspect and the infrastructure behind yourself and Phil, who else has been pivotal? And I don't mean necessarily individuals, I mean in terms of individual roles in making that work. For people that want to kind of simulate the journey that you guys have been on, not necessarily in that same niche, in the kind of English roots music, but in their respective niche, what are the key players that they need to make sure are in place in order to give them the best chance of success with this kind of cottage industry model?
You don't want management. You want administration.
Okay.
Now, the ideas came from probably me and Phil, and then me, Phil and Gerald, me, Phil and Vaughan, me, Phil and Vicky now. You know, wouldn't it be good to do a maritime theme tour? Wouldn't it be good to do cathedrals? Okay. Not a manager saying, okay, this is what you guys should do, let me happen. You have to be involved in the process. And if you're working for a percentage of the door, you have to be intimately in, you have to have a sense of what your value is on the street.
Yeah.
But don't want an agent in between you and some person who wants to put on a show.
Yeah.
Yeah, they want $4,000. They want $5,000. You have to be involved in the process by saying, well, how many people do you think will come and see them? What do you think you could charge in Europe? What are your costs? You know, and then coming back to us, someone's got a 300-seater venue in the Northeast, good venue, costs. We know we're bringing our infrastructure. So it's administration and conversation you need. Because normally an agent is going, what's the most I can screw out of this person?
Yeah.
The least those lazy buggers will get out of bed for. So say they get you a huge fat fee and there's no one there, and the promoter's going, particularly if they're not professional, but doing it because they love the genre.
Yeah.
What band go out for 500 people and there's 600 people spending £20? The band walk in and go, what if the band walk in and go, what's this shit PA?
Yeah.
What if the poor amateur promoter gets a wish list of a rider where they want bottles of brandy, and why should a bloody amateur promoter give you a hot meal?
Yeah.
They're not a caterer. Yeah. They can make things happen. But all of that antagonism is taken out of the system. So whether I do a village hall for 100 people or whether we do the Albert Hall, we are involved in all of those details. And Ralph always said, a very wise man, he said, everybody has to wet their beak. He said, sure, everybody makes something from the process. And
it's more like, sorry, Steve, it's more like kind of creating an ecosystem around you rather than kind of the infrastructure then, isn't it?
It is really. And people think it's about a bunch of songs. They really think about, and so many songwriters think, oh, the next album, the next song will do what? Win me the lottery? Take me out of all this squalor? It's about creating a community of people who care what you do. And part of that mix is the music. A lot of it is, but also is knowing about you, knowing about your journey, having a sense of what you are and where you're from. And it's much more complex. And every songwriter has a relative who has a friend who had a friend who's had something covered by Madonna, and now they're sitting on a manor somewhere. You know, it's like, I've got a mate who's won the lottery. It's not going to happen. Yeah. You know, in the folk scene, and I've said this on tour, there's only 2 songs that have made life-changing amounts from the English folk scene. Streets of London and First Time Ever I Saw Your Face. Maybe Alan Taylor's, he did one that was covered by a big American artist. Even then, it's not life-changing. The chances of winning the lottery from the English folk scene as a songwriter, well, more chance of winning the lottery than having a...
Yeah, absolutely.
So this, all you've got is the journey to the shop. That is it.
Yeah.
May as well make it enjoyable and work with people that you have a nice day with.
You talk about community, the kind of, you have to create community, and I like that. And I've heard the term super fans, call it what you wish. Community is absolutely spot on in terms of giving it an identity. How have you, over the years, nurtured that community? Because I've seen it grow from, I remember seeing you with Trace Elliott acoustic amps in a pub somewhere in Loughborough, through to Glastonbury, to the headline in the Cambridge Folk Festival, things like that. How have you taken people on that journey with you? Because it's not just about the music, as you say, it's about community. But how have you facilitated the growth of that community? What have been the key things? And when you look back, what were the great decisions that you made in terms of seeing that grow and come to fruition?
Okay, well, the first thing you have to say, this is not a league table where there's a Premier League and a league sponsored by B&Q. You know, this is not. You are not passing through this genre on the way to somewhere else.
Yeah.
You know, you didn't used to play to 500 people and now you're really fed up. You're only playing to 120. Okay. You frustrate that expectation. Do the Albert Hall on a Saturday night and a Village Hall on the Wednesday night.
Yeah.
And enjoy them both equally, because all you have is that journey and those places that you play music. And people always ask, you know, what's the best gig you ever had? Always assume it's the biggest one.
Yeah.
I always say, okay, what's the best meal you've ever had? What's the best leg over you ever had? Does it have to be a 5-star hotel?
Yeah.
Does it have to be the Fat Duck in Bray? It can be. I mean, we happen to know the head chef there, Ashley, but we've had mackerel at Abbotsbury pulled straight out of the water and on barbecue. On that day, that romantic liaison and that meal was the best, you know, and you have to look at it like that. And you can program yourself to think like that by keeping on using that language. You know, you can, was it NLP? The words you use for your everyday experiences affect the way you see those experiences.
Yeah.
So you don't go to a village hall and think, shit, there's only 100. You think, isn't this brilliant? 100 people came to see me in the middle of the Lake District, you know. Yeah. And after a while, you sort of believe your own legend. It's a funny sort of, it's hard to explain to people, but all of the language and all of the terms and all of the expressions and adjectives determine how that journey runs. So you have to look at each day as what's the best gig, the one I'm doing? What's the best song, the one I just wrote? You know? And I think that that's very much the key to it. It's not a league table, whereas everybody, all the business models, all your friends tell you, yeah, just one song, mate, just that, and then oh, it's not fair. Look at those bastards doing that, and you could be doing that, and you know, you can eat yourself up with that. If you're an acoustic musician, this is the world you're in.
Yeah. I think that's incredibly sound advice for anybody kind of not just necessarily starting on that journey that has, but may become disillusioned with it on the way. I think you're absolutely spot on with that. Obviously, you and Phil for the last 20 years or whatever it is have lived in each pocket.
Just going to say goodbye to my wife, who's a doctor.
That's it.
Quick, this is being recorded, though.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
And I'll be back for the leaving thing.
Yeah.
And so I'll be back at about 2-ish.
All right, darling.
And then we'll go to the beach.
All right, okay, bye.
And socially distanced at the beach in a socially distant way.
That's the disclaimer done.
That's the disclaimer done, yeah.
Good stuff. You and Phil, you've been living in each other's pockets for 20 years. How does that work? Because we
did our first together in '87.
Wow. Because we so often you see kind of great musical potential fall at the wayside because people aren't able to sustain viable relationships, working relationships, friendships, whatever that may be. What's been the secret to you guys seeing it through?
How many people are going to see this?
Who knows?
Well, is gloriously indifferent to everything. Phil will just turn up, pick up his instrument and play.
And be great.
And that's what he wants to do. He's not telling me we need to do this song, we need to do that song, we want to do that song. He just says, where's the set list? And he just basically wings it on an level. You know, I'm not working with another songwriter who's, hang on, it's not fair that you get to do all that and I get to do that. And how come, and my girlfriend thinks that I never get a chance to do this and blah, blah, blah. Phil just goes, okay. If I was to say to Phil, you know that song you normally play on the fiddle, you want to try it on the slide guitar? Yeah, right. Yeah. We're nominated for a folk award. Yeah. You know, someone wants to do a major feature for us. Phil has always known that this is it. This is the journey we're on. And he does not badmouth other people. He never slags off a venue. He doesn't get involved in all of the usual musicians. No. How come, you know, and I'm as guilty as anyone. You know, how come we've empowered so many promoters? We've encouraged so many younger musicians for whom we are now totally invisible. You know, half the guys that sat at our feet, who were your influences when you were younger? Oh, yeah, it was so-and-so, and it was so-and-so. What about those? For some reason, it's the most uncool thing in the world to say that Show of Hands, role model and music was influential. And I'm always moaning about it, you know. The folk scene is gloriously indifferent to us, or the folk award scene, and rewards people who are essentially predators.
Sure.
I want to know the bottom line and how much they're getting. You know, they're not interested in opening up venues. So even now, you can hear it in my voice. It pisses me off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally and utterly and gloriously indifferent to the whole thing. And so I never get any grief from Phil. We can travel together for hours without feeling the need to talk to each other. He just turns up and he plays. And so I think that's probably the key to it, really. It's
So it's literally about ensuring that there's a dynamic fit between the different personalities and
for some reason, people buy into the idea. I sometimes, when kids look at you, there's you and there's the idea of you. There's the cartoon version. There's is it the logos? There's some word for it. we contain a sort of idea of ourselves. And these two guys from the West Country, and the one, this big guy, and it's like, and this guy like that, and looks a bit moody sometimes. It's like people go, "Oh, that's quite a nice idea," and that is, in a sense, is that the brand of Show of Hands. You know, before you take the music, there's a sort of identity about it, and occasionally we strip it back to just the duo, thinking, "Well, are people going to miss all the other ingredients?" And they go, "No, this is fine," you know. So it's yeah.
Talking about the music then, because one of the things that kind of always strikes me is that you have, even with limited production in terms of timbral variation with acoustic instruments and what you have a unique sound, and I don't know whether that comes from alternative tuning, from a playing style, from a writing style, whatever that is. How important has it been to this musical identity that Show of Hands has got? Has that been an intentional thing, or has that kind of naturally evolved as you've developed as a writer? Because I say you have this unique sound.
I mean, do you want me to show you technically on an instrument, Ben?
I'd love that. That'd be incredible.
Well, what we've got, first of all, our secret weapon.
Can I just show you this, Steve? 1 second. Look, I'm going to show you down there.
There's another. The cello mandolin, particularly with that top E down to D. You know, those big, chunky power chords. If you have a multi-instrumentalist that can decorate that with mandolin, with fiddle, and with slide guitar, you've got the complete sound spectrum, haven't you? From
the bottom end,
from the big modal chords. And I don't tend to play in folky rhythms a lot. You know, I tend to do those I tend to do or those big driving ones.
Yeah.
So when I came to start using the guitar a bit more, I didn't go to the same Ds. There's it. Or the Cs. I think they're weak chords. But if you go to the B modals there, that big C sharp minor with the open two top strings, you're creating the sort of big modal ambience of the cello mandolin with the drone strings, but you're not. So even if I play a G, it'll be rather than a. You know, can you hear the difference?
Yeah.
It's chords that don't have the major or minor thirds, and I try and go for big droney thumpy notes, and then you've got Phil to decorate the top end. If Miranda's with us, she can add the sort of bottom end to it and the third harmony. So you've got a landscape that we've sort of built up, and that's the backdrop for the songs, which are obviously tend to be sometimes issue based or a bit sort of dark, you know, in their content. And when I got the tenor guitar, again, I was tuning it CGDG. It's its fifth, fourth, so I can play the same shapes. It's got that similar openness. I mean, I learnt a lot from, obviously, with from watching Seth as well, the way that he plays the tenor guitar. But again, it's not folksy. It's bigger open chords, rather than traditional first place chords. So that's one of the ingredients of the sound, I think. And as I say, then when you add the mandolin, the fiddle, and the slide guitar, and the top end instruments, you have like an oral picture.
Brilliant. Yeah, really, really helpful stuff. So I guess to kind of bring things to a bit of a close, going back to the beginning, you've seen the music industry, not just at cottage level, but at global level, evolve probably more so, and I'm talking now technically, I think, more so than any other generation. So tapes were probably the done thing when show of hands first started out. Perhaps Dark Fields was on CD. Was there CDs before that?
Our first ever tour before we were full-time in 88, 89, we had 8 cassette machines in the dressing room, all linked up to a master machine, and we were running off copies of cassettes to sell at the end, you know. So yeah, we have seen it evolve rather a lot. And now the days of selling hard units is all over. That's finished now. I'm not sure anybody's going to make a CD in 2 years' time. I really want.
I agree. So,
you know, I think, and this probably has hastened what this lockdown has done. It's hastened a lot of decisions that were waiting around the corner for you. Some hard decisions, you know, with, for example, with our industry model of relying on bums on seats. If we were to have 25% of our audience say, you know what, I think I'll give it a miss this autumn, we're broke. It's all over. So we were teetering on the edge of a cliff that might have been 2 years away, and now it's there. So different strategies now, different approaches are needed, and probably they always were waiting. CD sales used to be nearly 30% of our income. Used to sell to £4 a person some nights. Yeah. Imagine 300 people. That's £1,200 worth of CD income on some nights with a new album. That's down to that's about 70p a person now, and dropping.
So what does streaming mean for show of hands? Because the income from that is essentially, it becomes a marketing tool, doesn't it?
It means profile. That's all it ever means. You know, there was an age, I mean, maybe even 6 years ago, we were thinking about making DVDs, and DVD sales started to decline. You know, all the DVDs that we made, I'm streaming one every Friday night.
Yeah.
And on a voluntary basis of PayPal, we're making more than when we were selling them. You know, people want content, but they're not buying the hard units anymore. So it's profile. It means you might be able to reach more people. It means, you know, as I was talking to you earlier, I might be able to do more restricted concerts with a theme to less people for a higher ticket price. Who knows? All sorts of ideas are being kicked around. But if you're still sitting there trying to write the next hit, then I'm afraid someone's going to come along and dig you out years' time and wonder what happened.
How do you, as show fans, how do you decide which new technologies, new strategies to embrace? Is that down to your gut, what you kind of your futuristic thinking?
A lot of it is still being connected to your community. You get a sense of what they'd like to happen. You know, you have to think, and I always do this when it comes to a show. I always sit there in the audience as not as me, and think, what would be a nice thing to happen now?
Yeah.
Okay, they've just done that. Oh, what about an unaccompanied song? I visualize moments and try and recreate them musically. And what I'm doing with our followers now is, what would be a nice thing for them to, well, what about a chat? What about just Steve to some requests? What about Phil to do a fiddle masterclass? You know, so you just have to try and have a sense of what they would like from you and try and tick that box and somehow try and monetize it in a way that doesn't look too cynical.
Steve, listen, I'm not going to keep any more of your time, but thank you so much for sharing that with us. There's some real kind of nuggets of gold in there for people, I say, that are out on that journey in their respective niche. So thank you for taking the time to chat to us, for sharing that so openly and honestly. And I'd love to do it again sometime.
Why not?
Bless you. Thanks, Steve.